All right. Great to see all of you. And if you have never been on this before, you can hit the little icon at the bottom right. It says chat with everyone. And you're welcome to click on that so that you have the chat open on the right. And that'll let you type in any questions you might have. You can do that anytime about anything. And I didn't have any questions, and I didn't put a theme, but I thought that I would talk a little bit about the left and the right brain, because I was trying to, for some time, I was trying to, how can we put this into one picture where you can really understand the left brain perspective and the right brain perspective. And so I went into meditation, and I was coming out, and I had a wonderful, welcome to everybody. And I had a wonderful download. And I saw in one image how the left and the right brain work together. And so I wrote this in Patreon. So it's an older text. It's called, I think it's called NLP and Enlightenment. And that is the vision that I had of the left and the right brain. And so the picture is actually from Star Wars. Do you remember the very first Star Wars that came out? And Luke goes onto the ship and he starts playing 3D chess with Chewbacca. Do you guys remember that? Such a great scene. And so he's playing a 3D game, right, in front of them. They're playing in a hologram. And so it's a holographic chessboard, and it's really fun. And so that is, so your body takes all 5 of your senses, everything that's streaming through the senses, and it's much more than we realize, because we only get this much that filters through the subconscious when we're actually getting a continuous avalanche that's falling through the senses. And so the subconscious takes all of that information, and it's just this huge amount, and it just deletes massive amounts of it. So you're not getting that information. And then you take that information, and it deletes, distorts, and generalizes it, and the left brain puts you as the character that you are playing in the chessboard, right? So here's the holographic chessboard, and you are the player in the center of the board. And that's how your left brain sees your life. It says, I am here, and this is my life. But you're in the chessboard at this point when you're looking at life from this perspective. And then the right brain takes all of that sense information, and it hovers outside of the chessboard. So it takes all of that information. It says, I am all of that. I am everything. And that's how you can have a left brain and a right brain at the same time. And that's why the right brain is spoken of as the guardian angel, because it's actually guarding over you continuously. And so when we talk about God, where do we naturally look? Up, right? Because that's it. We're here. This is the left brain personality in the center of the game. And we look up, which is the right brain perspective, which hovers outside of the game. So you have, in that one model, both sides of the brain operating at the same time. And so I had one student, he told me I was going on a hike, and suddenly I lifted up out of my body and I saw myself hiking. So that's the right brain perspective, isn't it? And that's why so the whole of yoga is we're going to take this guy down here and we're going to put him into the low idle state. And that's going to allow me to get in touch with bliss and expansion. So how do we get in touch with that right brain, right? We just expand. We go into that perspective and suddenly we start touching on these very deep things, the right brain and bliss. So I thought I'd start with that because I think it's extremely relevant to meditation. It makes sense of what we're doing in meditation. And I occasionally get people, they're like, I don't know if I like this left and right brain. And I get that. That's okay. But it really makes sense of everything that people are trying to do spiritually. So namaste. Thank you, Suba. And Edward says, when doing Mahamudra, how long do you try to hold the breath? Well, it's really about your comfort. So breath holds are very good. And what happens in a breath hold is that your blood pressure is going to spike. So it's going to go up. And then you're going to recover. You're going to stop holding the breath and the body recovers and now you're going down. And so what happens is we start out with a blood pressure that is here and we hold the breath, the blood pressure spikes and then it goes down. And so now you're left with a blood pressure that is now lower than when you begin. And if it's just a few degrees, that's good enough because just a little bit of a lower heart rate and just a little bit of a lowered blood pressure will right away put us into a deeper state and we'll have just a little more tranquility to follow the very simple rule of be still and know. That's it. That's all we're trying to do in meditation. Be still and know. So we just lower the heart rate a few degrees and we lower the blood pressure a few degrees and boom, we're already in a lower state. We're in a more receptive state. We're more quiet and we start hearing more. Even if it's just more silence, we start hearing more of that silence and it's profound. It's really amazing and profound. So with Mahamudra, I'm just going to stretch and hold the breath. And so I'm only going to hold it as long as it's comfortable because I know I'm going to spike and I don't want to overdo the spike because then I'm going to have a harder time recovering, right? So I'm awakening a little bit of the sympathetic system as I spike my blood pressure while holding the breath. I'm also affecting the medulla. I'm also affecting the lungs as both of those begin to reprogram and they begin to increase their ability to handle CO2. So we call that CO2 tolerance. And so you're doing all of that as you hold the breath. And so you only want to do it as long as it's comfortable. And somebody was saying something? That's okay. So we're only going to do it as long as it's comfortable, and then we're going to let go and allow ourselves to recover. So make sure you always get that recovery because that's where the really deep state begins to come in. And then we do it again, and then we do it again, and that allows for a deeper and deeper and a lower blood pressure. So that's taking place in the Mahamudra stretching, along with elongating the muscles, which is going to allow you to sit very still much more easily and have a profound experience in meditation. So that's a great question. And so it's just as long as you can do it comfortably and then allow yourselves to recover. Please, can you kindly give some guidance on how to deal with worries in daily life? Wow, that's a great one. How do I deal with worries? Well, first there's the way that Ashok taught me to deal with persistent thoughts in meditation. He said, write them out on a piece of paper, write out what the concern is, and then he said, Now formulate a solution. So, okay, I'm going to do this to fix it. And he said, write out all of the steps. He was an engineer, so this came very, very naturally for him. So he's like, okay, write out the problem. Okay, write out the solution. And then said, write down when you're going to take care of it. And now you have a full plan. So you've satisfied your left brain, right? You have a plan for this problem. And now when it comes up in meditation, you tell your subconscious basically, hey, I already have a plan for this. I don't need to think about this right now. That's for another time, and I've already got a plan for that time. And that will appease your left brain greatly. And you'll find that it washes out the worry very well. Now, of course, the other things that we can do Om Japa in the chakras. So worry is associated with fear. So if we were to just sit and do some Navi Kriya and Om into the third chakra. So I put the head into the neck lock, a very comfortable neck lock. And that's putting pressure on the carotid sinus on either side. And so already my heart rate is going to go down because of that. And then I put my mind on the third chakra, right around the belly button. And I imagine that my Om is going into it about 1.5 to 2 inches. And that's really stimulating the front side of the chakra. And so it's going to release energy through the ventral vagal. And I'm gonna, whoops, how do I do that? If you're, Sia, if you could mute your thing, if you're able to. I have to learn how to do that. If I can mute everybody or unmute everybody. So, that's really good. It's still making noise. Let's see if I have a control here. No, I don't think I do. I have to have a control.
Forrest,
yes.
Would you clarify when you say 1 to 2 inches? Is that from the surface of the skin, say from the belly button, 1 to 2 inches in from there? So you're talking like in the center of the body, then? Yes.
Absolutely, but coming from the front for Navi Kriya specifically. And that's because the Navi, so that's the oral tradition, is that the Om comes from the front and goes in for Navi. Whereas the Kriya Yoga, when you're doing that, it can be in the center, or it can come from the back, or it could come from the front. But the Navi is specifically from the front because you're trying to work with the ventral vagal. And that'll make a big difference in which way it's going to release the energy up through the ventral vagal. So I've spoken before, some people get pressure in the chest, or they feel like they're going to have a burp, or they're going to yawn. And that's because the ventral vagal is actually clearing out. And that's part of what the Navi is designed to do for you. It's designed to clear that out before you begin the rest of your meditative practice. And it works really well. If everybody could mute your microphone. So if you look down at the bottom in the center, there should be a little microphone. And you can just click on that, and that'll mute you. And that'll make it so when you do want to... Perfect, thank you. Thank you, everybody. That's very helpful. That then we can hear everyone. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question, or to type it on the side. So, okay, so back to worries. We can write it out. We can practice Navi Kriya. We can practice Om Japa. So if I'm in the middle of my day and I'm not going to do my neck lock, right? I'm in my office or I'm talking to somebody. I can still do Om Japa in the third chakra, or wherever I feel the worry. So sometimes these things are in more than one chakra, and you're more than welcome, of course, to do the Om into multiple chakras. So I'm going to do some in my third. I feel some in my heart. And when you feel a chakra, sometimes I was talking with somebody that they had a roll up into the heart and they felt a little bit stuck in the heart. It's wonderful to be in the heart, but they still felt a little bit stuck. So I said, okay, here's the heart. You can also Om on the top and you can Om on the bottom, and see if that doesn't raise you to have a roll up into the throat. So you can think about the chakra as a 3D thing, right? And you can Om on the bottom, you can Om on the top, you could even Om on, I haven't really Om'd on the side, but you totally could. You could Om on the side, you can Om from the back, you can Om from the front, and that kind of play with your chakras is very beneficial. It really helps, and it will help cause the roll up. So if you feel something in the third chakra and then you feel something in between the heart, well, that's because it's somewhere between fear and and hurt, or fear and a little bit of worry in between. So it's getting projected somewhere in between. So that's totally normal, and you can Om into all of that, and it will be beneficial. And the other thing, we can go back with timeline therapy and work with fear. So I had a lady call me up, and she couldn't she couldn't be in the passenger seat while her husband was driving. She'd had an accident on the freeway, and it really scared her. It gave some PTSD when it came to driving. And we went back and we cleared out fear all the way to when she was 3. And she had a cousin who was running around with a bug trying to scare her. And we cleared all of that out. And we did a little bit of the anxiety cure, which is more in the future rather than the past. So we cleared out the past, and then we cleared out the future with timeline therapy. And she went down the freeway with her husband right after this, and he drove straight between 2 semis. And she said, I was a little bit nervous when he did that, but I was okay. I could handle it. It was nothing like the fear I was experiencing before this. I said, well, I'd be a little bit nervous going between 2 semis as well. So that's normal. But all of the baggage of fear that she was holding on to, she released through the timeline therapy. So all of those can be helpful for handling worries in our daily life if we can clear out the past and clear out our anxiety. So anxiety comes from the prefrontal cortex. And it's really one of the wonderful things that makes us human is that we are continuously anticipating problems in the future. And it's very good when we have to avoid jungle cats. But then we get into our modern life where our worries are very small, and we're just continuously projecting these horrible things with our prefrontal cortex. And so the way to cure that is the timeline therapy for anxiety, which I have a walkthrough for timeline therapy and anxiety, is really wonderful. And what you're actually doing is you're training your prefrontal cortex how to be more hopeful and constructive in your future, rather than always continuously projecting the worst case scenario into your future, which is how people have anxiety. They just have they're just eaten up with projecting horrible things into their future. And so you have to retrain your prefrontal cortex that you don't need to do that. No jungle cats are coming to eat you. We can calm down just a little bit, and it really, really helps wonderfully. So I hope those suggestions are helpful. And so you have something very, very hands-on in the timeline therapy, where you're trying to work with specific anxieties and specific fears. And it does that with the gestalt, which is in the subconscious. And that's how timeline therapy works. It's a kind of gestalt therapy. And gestalt just means a grouping. So we have fear, and then we have another fear, and we have another fear. And the subconscious says, oh, these are all fears. These are all linked together. And so when you find the very first one in timeline therapy and you knock it over, you knock over the entire gestalt. And that's how timeline therapy works so well. It clears out the entire basalt from the past. And so, so that's very specific. And then you have Om Japa, which doesn't have to be specific. We just have to specifically find the third chakra and Om into it. And so now you have something of a little bit of both. And it's really a wonderful combination, I think. So I hope that helps a lot. Should you ever hold the breath after exhale? That's a great question. Kevin, thank you. In my lineage, this is the best water on earth, I think, unless you have your own wonderful well. In this lineage that I teach of Kriya Yoga, we breathe in when we practice. We breathe in and we hold the breath always. Because when you breathe in and you hold the breath, you activate a little more of the upper dorsal vagal. And when you breathe out and you hold the breath, you activate or awaken a little more of the lower dorsal vagal. So if you haven't done a year or more of Om Japa in the chakras, and you begin breathing out and holding the breath, now you're stimulating the coccyx and the second chakra and the third chakra a little bit more. And so it's helpful, especially in the beginning, for like a year, if we just breathe in and hold the breath and not stimulate the lower part as much. Now, after a year, then it's okay. Then you can breathe out and hold the breath, and you'll be cleaned out enough that it won't overstimulate your lower chakras and lower projections of the limbic brain. And so that's why, that's the reasoning behind the lineage that I carry, where they breathe in and hold the breath. Now, in the tranquil breath, you might notice that your breathing just automatically pauses, and it might pause at the bottom. And if it does that naturally and spontaneously, then you just go with it. Like Lahiri Mashaya says, he says, when the tranquil breath arrives, stop the Kriya. It's like, forget everything else. It's like I have this wonderful story, a wonderful student, a wonderful yogini, and I'm retraining her to really hold on to and awaken these deep processes of tranquil breath, freeze response, roll up of consciousness, bliss, rather than be concentrated on technique. But she was still a little bit, she's kind of like in between. She was starting to get it, right? She's starting to build skill in her meditation. And she says, oh, I had this wonderful meditation. I went into this really deep place. I was feeling bliss. And then I remembered I have to go back and do a whole bunch of Kriya, because she was kind of attached to the technique and attached to a certain number of Kriya, right? And I'm like, no. And I told her, you know what? You're praying to Jesus. And what happens? Jesus shows up. Are you going to hang out with Jesus, or are you going to tell him, you know what, Jesus, I'm not done with my prayer. What are you doing coming here? You can't come in a timely manner when I finish my prayer. It's the same thing with Kriya. When the tranquil breath shows up, we just sit with the tranquil breath. And so if it decides it's going to pause at the bottom, I don't mind, because it's the tranquil breath. And my first rule is to just, oh my God, I'm going to hug that tranquil breath and just soak it right up as much as I possibly can. And I'm going to inoculate myself with that tranquil breath. I'm going to soak it into my being and recognize it and go, oh my God, it's the tranquil breath inside of me. This is amazing. I'm going to get out of meditation, write in my diary. Oh my God, I went into the tranquil breath. This is amazing. And I think it was the first level, or I think it was the second level, or I think I had the third level of the tranquil breath. It was just like the breath was gone and I couldn't even find it. And now I'm really celebrating it, and I'm really reinforcing and recognizing the tranquil breath in myself. And that's all part of Kriya. And that's why Lahiri Mashaya was very, very clear on this. He said, when it shows up, stop the technique. right? We just stop. Okay, Jesus is here. Krishna is here. Whoever shows up, right? Thank you so much. So, so should we? So should you ever hold the breath after a year? Then you could do it as a practice, or if it comes automatically, then go ahead. Absolutely, great question. Could you speak about the overlap between chakras and the lower, middle, and upper Dantian in Taoism martial arts? Well, they're absolutely the same thing. Absolutely the same thing. So for example, in martial arts, they call the Dantian, right, the third chakra, and they're really fixated on that. And Todd Murphy, so brilliantly, he said this is because in martial arts you get punches, people punching at your face, people swinging swords at you, and you have to overcome fear. So where does the martial artist put his mind? He puts it on the third chakra, and he holds his mind there, and it's a form, it's a very light form of the Navi Kriya. So as the martial artist is holding himself there, they're also doing grounding. So that's an essential part of all martial arts. They're learning to relax and harmonize with the earth and ground with the earth, and that's really, really super important. It's like when I was in the ashram, one of the postulants who came and joined the ashram, his name was Frank, and Frank had done kung fu with his family from his entire childhood. So he had two brothers, so there were three brothers, and this father had inherited a pure form of kung fu, and he was teaching his kids. It was mandated; they had to train in this martial art, and Frank would come out and play basketball, and people would run into him and they would just bounce off of him. And he was shorter, and he was not heavier. He was, just normal sized. He had some muscle from working out his whole life, but he was very normal sized, and people would run up and hit Frank and bounce off of him because he was so grounded. That was just instilled in his body. And I had a little bit of neck tension, and I watched him one day. He would kind of wobble his neck, and I'm like, I bet that like loosens up his neck. And so I tried that out like for a few days. So I'd walk around kind of like this, right? Like my head was on a bobble, and it was just the most perfect thing. It just totally relaxed my entire neck, and it was wonderful. So I used to model Frank. He was great. And so the Dantian and all of that, that's all completely in line with the chakra system and the yogic system. And so, yeah, go ahead.
One follow-up to it is, in some teachings, people in martial arts have told me that the lower dantian is closer to the second chakra. Mm-hmm. And so, but I found it happy when I heard you say that it's really related to the third chakra.
Yeah.
And so I can just go with that. Go with that.
Perfect. Absolutely. So it's all a projection, right? And so it's not a physical thing. And it's the same with, it's similar to the energy centers that are used in acupuncture. I remember I was learning from a friend of mine who had studied acupuncture for years. And I pushed on a point, and I go, is that the point? She goes, well, you felt it and you connected to it perfectly. And so in acupuncture, we have a saying, the point is the point. Meaning, once you find it, that was it. And maybe it's not exactly like the picture that you saw in the diagram where the needle is supposed to go in, but you actually found it, and that's what counts. And so it's the same thing, or a similar thing, with the projections that come down from the brain and go into the body. So is it right on top of the belly button? Well, in our practice, it is. It's basically right on top of the belly, below or inside from the belly button. And so in Dubeji, Maheshwari Dubeji, in his book Kriya Yoga, he's my Param Guru, he said that when you begin the Navi, that the center will be off. So he's suggesting that through the practice of the Navi, you're actually recentering where the projection should be held in the body. So he's saying it's off by as much as, I think he said as off as by much as 2 inches, and it will come back to where it should be in the body. So that's a really interesting statement. So he's saying these things kind of fluctuate and they float around. And the martial artist is very interested in syncing, right? That grounding. And so they might feel here's the chakra, and as I'm practicing Navi, I'm concentrating on the center of that chakra. But the martial artist might say, well, I'm really like this side of the chakra because that kind of helps me get grounded as I'm feeling it. And yet I'm still working with the same chakra. And so he's going to put his mind on the lower half of that chakra, and that might help him to ground and relax and sink. So, but yes, we're all talking about the same thing. Perfect. So I hope that helps. What do you think happens when we die? Well, I think that there's a wonderful book called Testimony of Light. And it's a story about 2 nuns. And one of the nuns, it's kind of like my own story. She's like, I want to investigate and read everything, and I can't do that in a nunnery. And so she left. But she was best friends with one of the other nuns. And over the years, they developed a telepathic rapport. They were that close. And so they would send each other messages telepathically, as the story goes. And so the nun that left the ashram, she investigated everything that she wanted to investigate spiritually, and then she passed away. And the other nun kept receiving messages from her friend after her friend passed away. And that's the entire book. It's called Testimony of Light. It's a wonderful book. And I have this wonderful ability to translate things. So I can take that whole book and translate it psychologically. But the whole of, I think we were talking about this on one of the other satsangs recently, that the whole of yoga is to get in touch with the vast intelligence of the divine, what Emerson called the oversoul, and what Patanjali called the Dharma Mega, the cloud of knowing. We're trying to get in contact with that and be so connected to it that at the point of the departure of the little personality, I'm still in touch with the grand whole. That's the point of yoga. And the Bhagavad Gita says, if that happens with you, if you are so connected with the grand whole, then you won't reincarnate. So somebody asked me, well, what happens to our consciousness as we go into the astral or into the Dharma Mega, but we're not united with it? We didn't quite accomplish that. I said, well, it's kind of like, you could imagine it like you're a chunk of ice floating in the ocean. So you're the same substance, but you've isolated yourself a little bit. You're still that ice. You haven't melted into the vastness of the Dharma Mega. And so then you're reborn and you get another chance, right? That's the idea of yoga. That's what yoga says about death. And that Testimony of Light is a beautiful story. I think it's a wonderful way to begin that discussion with yourself. If you'd like to read it, I think it's great. And you can find it on Amazon. I think her name is Helen, the one that wrote it. Great book. Do you do multiple Mahamudras at a time, as in some lineages? Yeah, I do three sets at least. So I do the left leg, then the right leg, then both legs together, and I do that 3 times at least. And as I'm doing it, I'm feeling what it's doing to me. And sometimes I'll feel like, oh, this is working so well, it's feeling so good, or I think I need a little bit more, and I'll do more. But I try and do at least 3. unless I'm short on time. So everybody that I teach Kriya, I always tell them, if you're short on time, go ahead and shorten these things. Do a little Mahamudra, a little Navi Kriya, a little bit of the Om Japa Kriya, and then a little bit of Paravasta, or sitting in the silence, that after effect poise. And so I've shortened everything, and I shrink that down so I have time to do whatever I need to do in my life, because we all have responsibilities. And then if I'm really out of time, then I shrink it all the way to just do 5 minutes heart rate variability, or 5 minutes of Kriya, or 5 minutes of Om Japa in the chakras. All of that is beautiful, and that's called spiritual survival. And I love that principle. And I've had so many people tell me, that spiritual survival's really saved me. And I think it's a great place to begin with meditation. I see some nodding of heads. Wonderful. Zachary, could you share any tips on circulating energy when it feels stuck in the head? I've had difficulty falling asleep a few times because of this. Oh, that's hilarious. My first student, Dwayne, called me up. He's like, I can't sleep. I'm like, okay. He's like, I did all of my Kriya practice, and I feel so charged, I can't sleep. And I started laughing. I said, that same thing happened to me. And now you have to move your meditation earlier some way so that you have more time to discharge before you sleep, to allow yourself to sleep. But I went through that for years, I think, where I would do all my Kriya, and then I couldn't sleep, or it would interrupt my sleep. And it's just kind of, you're balancing all these things. So you're going down and you're integrating with the subconscious brain waves, and so you get all these energetic reactions. And now it's just a rebalancing of all of that energy, and it takes a little while to process all of that. You can't just put the genie back in the bottle. You have to process with him for a while. So it's a process. And so that stuck energy in the head, I would pull it back to the medulla. So you just feel as if it's getting sucked back to the medulla. And you just feel, I've got it here maybe, or maybe it's on the top of my head, wherever it might be. And I'm just going to feel it kind of sucking back into the medulla. And that's the first one. And then just practice grounding. So any kind of grounding exercise. So I'll just I've got a video on that called about grounding. It's a long time ago, so that's a wonderful practice. And just do that over, and just kind of shake the body out, and just let everything sink down. Just kind of loosen everything up, and breathe out, and feel yourself connecting with the earth. Go outside if it's not too cold. Stick your feet in the dirt. Feel the dirt. When you are able to touch the earth without anything in between, there's an immediate effect, and this will actually take off inflammation from the body. So usually the body's in a slightly inflamed state, and they've monitored this. As soon as you touch the ground, it creates a circuit. It's just like putting the antenna on your TV when you've got static and you have to realign it, and then suddenly the image comes clear. Well, if you can touch the earth, your whole body gets a little bit clear, and all that inflammation will immediately go down. And so some of that charge, which is like this, if you can touch the earth, if it's not too cold out, you can stick your feet in the dirt, especially in a spot that feels like this spot has a good feeling. You can do that, and it will immediately come down, and you'll start to ground immediately. So all of those are relevant. But shake the body. If it's really bad, go in the shower and do some hot and cold therapy. So put the shower on, cold, then hot, then cold, then hot. Bearable, right? A bearable cold and a bearable hot, and cycle. Cold, then hot, over and over again. And that gets the energy moving through the body. That works really well for any kind of aches and pains. It's a wonderful, wonderful old therapy, cold and hot therapy. And it will get energy moving and get the healing process started. So I hope that helps. Sia says, why the energy is much more expansive when I meditate in some special religious site or spiritual site such as Assisi, where you just went. Wonderful. I recently visited Assisi, had much deep meditation that I could achieve at home. Well, Yogananda said that the saints or the deep meditators that have come before us, that they leave their mark in the ether. And I had a wonderful yogi who would travel around to all the holy sites just so he could meditate in the etheric resonance that these souls had left before him. And he would walk around different sites and he'd try and feel these spots. And you can do the same thing. I do this all the time when I go to a park. I just feel the whole park and I'm like, where is the coolest energy? And I actually mean cold, like a freeze response almost. The coolest energy in the park. And you just feel where it's a little bit hot and I don't want to spend my time there. And then over here under this tree, it's so nice and cool. And that's that a little bit of that grounding. And so you can feel that. And when you go to a holy place, same thing. There's some resonance where these souls have left their mark in the ether and it's still echoing in the ether. You can still feel it. And it helps to align your brain waves. And so you have easier access to the gamma. And even the inspiration is enough. So I went on, this was actually one of my second samadhis. I think this was my second samadhi. So I had a samadhi in the Parshalan ashram, and then I went on retreat, and there was a little book about the Ramayana. It was the entire Ramayana, but it was condensed. And I wish I'd paid attention to the author and the title, the exact title of the book, because I'd love to have it. But it was a very condensed and easy to read version of the Ramayana. And I was pouring through it. I was on retreat for a week, and I just fell in love with it. And I kept cycling through my consciousness of Rama, Rama, Rama. And the story was so fresh. It just sucked me right in, and I went in to meditate. And because of that inspiration, the same kind of inspiration you're getting when you visit a holy site, you get more of that gamma, and it starts to suck you up, right? So the whole journey of meditation is to go down into the slower brain waves. The low idle state helps that. And then we go up into the higher gamma brain waves. So that inspiration is helping to pull us up into the gamma. In fact, I wanted to give you guys a video. Hold on just a second. I want to give you this. Here is a video. This is inspiring. These are babies laughing. And so the cute baby meditation, or these 4 babies laughing, is just absolutely infectious. So if you want to look at that and save that link, it's really fun. And so I hope that's helpful. That also, that cute baby meditation or any kind of inspiration like that, or reading a book about a saint that or a yogi that really inspires us, that gamma will begin to pull us up. So if you read things consistently that inspire you and you feel that your meditations are benefited because of it, that's absolutely why. The gamma is sucking you up, and you feel that in the ether, absolutely. So it's a little bit of resonance left in the ether. Great question. Marcia, in your Patreon video yesterday about healing breath through the body, I'm wondering if you want to lift thoughts and healing for someone else. Can you do this breathing through the body remotely for another by imagining breathing through their body with the Ha breath? Absolutely. And that's the basis of a lot of the healing technology in Huna. So it's so amazing, because I get people on the phone that are in India or the UK or somewhere in Europe and the Middle East, even Kuwait. I've talked to people in Kuwait, and I'll have them on the phone and I'll say, okay, can you feel the negative emotion? Yes, I can feel it. Is it okay with the unconscious mind to go ahead and let go of it? Yes, it is. And then I will do huna breathing, and I will breathe through them. And so I'm just doing the symbol of the huna, and I'm breathing through them with the symbol. That just helps to focus the energy a little bit, but you could easily just do om. So om. You could even draw the om with your hand and then push the om through them. Or I love the huna symbol called waha hamama. That's waha hamama. And it's a circle with a large circle in the center which shaded in with lightning. And so I'll draw that symbol and then I'll push it through the person. It's very opening. It's very opening. And so it's a really cool, energetic symbol. And that's all it is. It's just a channel for energy. And it's connected to Divine Mother, Waha Hamama. That's the Ma. And it's healing as it goes through the person. So I do that. I push it through the person. And we do that for a little bit. And then suddenly the emotion is gone. And so working with emotions this way over and over again, you begin to prove to yourself, oh my goodness, this works. And then you can start doing it for the body, and you can see that it does have an effect when you do this over and over again. So I've sat with people that have been in great pain, and I said, well, why don't we try a little bit of healing? And I'll breathe through them for 5 or 10 minutes, and the pain will greatly recede. In some cases, it stays that way for some time. So it's really, really helpful. It absolutely works. And you're just, okay, here's the person. I don't have to see them. I'm very lightly imagining or whatever brings them up to me, and I'm feeling them, and then I'm pushing the breath through them, just as you described, Marcia. So absolutely, you can absolutely do that. And I used to know a yogini who had Kundalini reactions, and she would go into automatic postures kind of like that, and then she would be asked by her higher self to pray for somebody, and the prayer would go through her and through the symbology of her body that was created in the posture, and that would help to channel the energy as she was praying for somebody. So that also works. Mudras work. You can put a mudra and channel the energy, but it's all just for moving the energy and clarifying the mind. So absolutely great question. William, in the new video you mentioned giving energy to an area of the body of someone to help them. How about when they have a headache? Is it because they have too much energy in the head? Would you help them draw out energy when it's stagnant or too much to cause the headache? Same when we have a headache intense ourselves, maybe related to Zachary's question. Yeah, that's a great question. So if somebody has a headache, it's usually to do, I find, with the nerves, with the muscles in the neck, which are too tight because of stress. So stress headaches are usually all around here. They might be a little bit up here. So this musculature can get tense, but usually headaches have to do with the neck. So if you can massage the neck or breathe through their neck, and then grounding, there are pressure points here which are very helpful. So this muscle right here, everybody likes it when you massage right there, because it's a primary muscle that gets tense when we're, oh my God, right? When we're in any kind of anxiety or frustration, right? This immediately gets tensed, and that tenses the rest of the muscles going up into the neck, and it starts to pinch nerves and pinch arteries. So everything is not flowing correctly. And if you can massage that for just a little bit, it works wonders. Then the next place is in the back, right about here. So if you can release that point, it will draw the energy down. So like you said, things can get stuck up in the head and not equalize through the body. So the next point would be the video where I taught how to work with the lower back. And I said that there's that point in the piriformis. If you can put your elbow into that point it will help all of the energy that's in the back and in the head flow down to the rest of the body, and it will help them ground like crazy. So somebody that has no understanding of grounding, no practice of grounding ever, if you just put your elbow into their piriformis, it will basically force their body to relax and ground itself. And a lot of times that will take care of a headache. So it's like you've got the head over here, and the glute and the piriformis are down here. How is that working to get rid of a headache? Well, you just opened up the channel and everything falls right out. And it's wonderful. And that's why some healers will work with the feet when somebody has a headache, especially around the big toe, which is associated with the head. That's because they're trying to draw that energy down from the head and ground and relax. So I hope that helps for somebody with a headache. And you can also expand. So there are if it's an energetic headache, right? Somebody's doing an energetic practice and it feels very stuck in the head, you can also expand. And that will help to release the energy in that way. And there's a wonderful hypnosis technique. And this is true for lots of different kinds of pain. If you can, here's the body. Let's say there's pain in the body. If I can go into the pain, sometimes the pain will disappear. Not always, but sometimes the pain will disappear. And so there's a technique of hypnosis where you ask the person, is the pain on the left side or the right side? And they say, oh, it's on the right side. Okay, is it on the right front or the right back? Oh, it's on the right front. Okay, is it on the left side of the right front or the right side of the right front? And now it's getting a little confusing, isn't it? And so they go in and they're like, okay, I think it's on the right front. Okay, it's on the right front or the right left front, to the front or the back? And now it's a little more confusing, isn't it? And so you keep asking them, and you're just kind of, here's the box of the head, and you're trying to cut it in half, and then 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 cut it in half, until you get really, really down. And what will happen is they'll get all the way down to the specific point, and it will shift. And now the mind goes, well, this pain can't be that real because it just moved. So I thought it was a real thing in my head, but it wasn't. It was more energetic than I realized. So this is what's happening in the subconscious. The subconscious is learning. Oh my God, the pain moved. And as it moves, and as you make it a little confusing, as you're leading them through this, the pain will shift and it will start to disappear. And if you keep doing that, it works. It will disappear unless it's a really, really, really bad, like migraine, really bad headache. Then sometimes it won't work no matter what, because it's just too overwhelming already. So I hope that helps. That's all my tools for headache. Hi, Forrest. I have seen a change in my behavior. Previously, I used to feel nervousness and fear in my navel. These days, the nervousness is manifesting in my heart chakra. Any thoughts on this? I try to Om on my heart now when I am worried and nervous. Well, that's interesting. So, and this is what I said, sometimes we'll think it's here, but we'll also feel it here. Well, we can Om here as well. So I always Om in the third chakra, especially for nervousness. So even if I didn't quite feel it there, I would still start by Oming in the third chakra. And then I would Om a little halfway up maybe, and then I would Om in the heart itself. So all of that is good. And here's another thing that you can try to help you to understand this, is when you feel nervousness, like if you can feel it right now, let's say, can I feel any kind of nervousness right? Okay, I feel a little bit. And then you just pull it up and pull it up and pull it up and pull it up and pull it up into the top of your heart. And suddenly, what started as nervousness will turn into excitement. And you'll go, oh my goodness, this is so weird. Because what started out as a negative turned into a positive just because you pulled it up into the upper nervous system. And it's a really wonderful way to begin to manipulate the energy inside of your body and see how it has an emotional response and fallout because of what you did. And so I think you're feeling a little bit of that. You're feeling it's not quite high enough that it's pure excitement just yet. So if you were to ohm into it and it came up a little bit farther, I think you would notice it starts. If it gets up in here, it's going to start turning into excitement. It's going to turn into something else. It's going to turn into, oh, something good is about to happen kind of feeling. And that's that transformation of energy which you are witnessing. So I ohmed into my third chakra and I felt nervousness, and now it's coming up in here. So you're actually experiencing a little bit of what we talk about in the roll up. You're having that roll up of energy, and you're noticing that it's transforming as it goes along. And so keep ohming into it, and you'll notice it comes up just a little bit higher, and you'll notice for just a little bit, it's like, oh, this is exciting. And then if you keep ohming through it, it will just vanish, and it kind of, you start to go into a more of expansive feeling. So really, really cool. That's a wonderful question. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I've been feeling something between my heart and belly and wondered what it was. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Oh, I'm so glad. It's really a very natural way to understand the chakras, isn't it? It's a flowing understanding rather than a rock solid, this is this and that is that kind of understanding. It's because that's not how a projection works, is it? A projection doesn't work as if it's a solid thing. It's floating around. And that's exactly why the acupuncturists say the point is the point. Hey Ben, are you familiar with Rudolf Steiner? He wrote in detail on what happens between death and rebirth. Thank you, Chris. That's a great suggestion. I'm going to look that up myself. Thank you very much. My pleasure, Suba. I'm so glad it helped. And Jeremy, could you please talk a bit about Hakala and how it relates to learning? I absolutely love the technique. Always eager to hear your thoughts or anyone's on it. I wish it was more widespread. I totally agree. Hakala should be everywhere, right? And especially in the school, because you can learn it. So I have a very, very old video, you've probably seen it, about Hakala and the learning state. So we think that we hold our memory is associated with the left brain, but it's not where we really hold our understanding. So our sense of knowing comes from the right brain. So the memory, just the log of what happened when, like a log book, takes place in the left brain. So we usually associate understanding with the left brain. And a lot of understanding is taking place in the left brain, but the actual knowing happens in the right. So as we get in touch with the right brain and the processes of the right brain through Hakala, we more easily gather information and bring it back. And so the technique that Tad would teach, he wouldn't call it Hakala. So this is Tad James, who's teaching NLP. And he would teach kids how to go up a grade point average. So if he had like 3 or 4 things that he would give to students, and he'd tell them, okay, if you do this, this will raise your grade point average by 1 point. And then he'd teach you another thing, like take out all your sugar, and this will make your grade point average go up by 1 point. And so he had like 3 or 4 of those, and by the end of the session, he's confirming to the child that your grade point is going to go up by 3 or 4 points. So one of those was the learning state, and he would tell them to go into Hakala and just imagine that their brain was opening. And so now they're in a right brain perspective. They're in more of a trance, and they're more connected to the subconscious. And so instead of trying to I have to grab everything and be tense, and when you're tense, you're closing yourself down a little bit, aren't you? You're in predator mode. You're just focused in on one thing, and so you're going to miss all of the learning. And so it's better for the child to open up and be in touch with more of the subconscious in Hakala, more of the right brain perspective of just allowing and knowing. And then they let all of the information in. And then Ted said, okay, when you finish the class, imagine that your brain is going to close down. So now you're back to normal, right? And then when you go in for the test, of course, you can study in between, but when you go in for the test, same thing. Okay, I'm going into my learning state. I'm opening up my perspective, and I'm just going to open up the top of my head, and all of the information will pour out. And kids, when they do this, they do much, much better at learning and much, much better on tests. And all of that has to do with Hakala and the right brain and getting in touch with the subconscious. Same here, Jeremy. It has changed my Kriya practice and helps to stay on medulla when I am not practicing. Fantastic. Yeah, I've also noticed the connection with the medulla, and I saw someone mention it in a comment on Forrest Patreon a long time ago. So if I start feeling any sort of bliss or paravasta in the middle of doing Kriyas, should I stop? It depends on the, Kevin is asking, it depends on the level of bliss. So if it's very slight, you can keep doing the Kriya, but if it's overwhelming, it feels like this is really significant for me today, then go ahead and stop and just enjoy it, and then you can go back to the Kriya later, back to the technique of HRV resonance and Om Japa in the chakras. Thank you so much. Thank you, Zachary. Are there any negative aspects of astral projection during Yoga Nidra? I don't think so. Now, Yogananda would caution people that, if you're out floating about, that he would warn you to practice, stay close to your body, but I don't really see it. If you're floating way out and you get in contact with the right amygdala, if you go into a deep place and you haven't been practicing Navi Kriya, you haven't been practicing Om Japa in the chakras, you might encounter something scary because as you open up to the right amygdala, it can be scary. But that's the insurance policy of the Om Japa in the chakras and the Navi Kriya, which you are doing. So I don't see any problem with it. And the astral projection is you're letting go of one of the processes of the left brain. And so you're just that much free. There's actually 4, and you've let go of 1. So it's really significant. And I think it helps us teach about how samadhi works. So I will be talking more about astral projection and how that fits with samadhi. It's one of the 4. So in the samadhi, you're actually releasing yourself from all 4 processes of the left brain, and you're going into the right brain, into a non-dual state. Whereas the astral projection, you're just free from 1, but it's still significant. It's a taste of that freedom. And then down here, that's my link for the laughing babies, the quadruplets, which is it's just infectious. Oh, here's a compilation of what Steiner said. Thank you, Chris, for the link. And some thank yous here. When is the Samadhi course coming? Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm working on it. So maybe in about a month or so, I hope. And feel free to ask me any questions about it. I can tell you all about it. So, and we're at an hour. It goes so fast. So, thank you all so much for coming. And I love seeing all of you. And you wonderful, wonderful questions. I hope you enjoyed it. And so, God bless. Thank you very much. And have a wonderful weekend. Thank you to everybody who could make it. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Guruji. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
You.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.